we're going to have a brief chat because some of you have asked about this man who just died in Russia, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, who was probably the first significant post-truth politician in contemporary European history. Now, what do we mean by post-truth politician? No, we don't mean somebody who lies all the time, who lies systematically. No, we mean somebody who lies in a very specific and manipulative way. Somebody who lies not so as to distort a personality, an event, an idea, but somebody who lies specifically with the view of distorting your trust in trust, to distorting your stable relationship with the idea that there is such a thing as getting the world right. You know, that famous conversation at the Treaty of Versailles where, you know, the question was raised, what are historians going to say about this in the future? And the answer came, well, they're not going to say that Belgium invaded Germany. So Vladimir Zhirinovsky came into prominence at the tail end of the Soviet period when you were allowed to create other parties except the Communist Party, and the Liberal Democratic Party was created. And the name was a farce. It was deliberately named like that to demote these terms, to make liberal and democratic terms of abuse. And the point of that party was to be a proto-fascist party that attracted all of the ugliness and darkness of the Russian political climate, so that that ugliness and darkness could then be controlled. So this was, at least in part, a KGB project aimed at controlling the most rabid, radical, imperialist, racist, ultranationalist elements in society by giving them a party, but getting the leader of that party essentially to be an agent who would sometimes go far, you know, and sometimes, as it were, break some eggs by stirring up a lot of toxicity and resentment and sometimes violence. But in the end, his role was to keep these folks under control. Eventually, he gained a little bit of independence in the 90s, but even then, he was quite surprised about what to do when he got a high number of votes, as happened in 1993, because he's not meant to, you know, hold power. He is meant to control this extreme demographic. So that's how it went. Then in the Putin period, he continued playing the same role. He was the person who was meant to be the scarecrow, attracting all of these unlovely political attitudes that were out there in society, so that they could be controlled, and that so that they would not fall under the mobilization of other people over whom the Kremlin wouldn't have control. And in exchange for this, Zhirinovsky got to be the actor he wanted on the political scene, saying things he didn't mean all the time. And he got to have a lot of stuff. He got to have a lot of money, a lot of houses, and so on. And then what happened in the last few years, and this is how we connect this to the fascist turn stuff we've been talking about that Putin has had. Recently, Putin has just eaten up a lot of Zhirinovsky's demographic, because Putin didn't want these people for many, many years. They were meant to be just controlled in this reservation headed by this sort of agent, this sort of actor who was a proto-fascist, but wasn't really that much of a proto-fascist. But recently, Putin has basically just largely absorbed Zhirinovsky's demographic. So if Zhirinovsky had lived on, then his role would have been really, really trivial. Alexei Venediktov, who is a hero in Russia, and his independent or mostly independent platform and radio station Echo Moscow was shut down by Putin, and Echo Moscow is actually just Russia's main way of talking to itself. But I just caught Venediktov sharing a lovely, typical story, unlovely story about Zhirinovsky, where Zhirinovsky was coming to the Echo Moscow studio when the Russian parliament was debating some kind of abortion law. And Zhirinovsky arrived late, and he was walking past Venediktov's cabinet, and he shouted, "What's the topic?" And Venediktov said, "It's the abortion debates, the bill going through parliament." And Zhirinovsky said, "What side do you want me to be on?" And Venediktov said, "You be against." And then Zhirinovsky came out and said, "I am against because..." So an actor and a man who, quite frankly, did a lot of the things that right-wing, post-truth populists do in the West and in North America, maybe even better. So it is for that reason, actually, that I inserted this clip into our last video on the main channel from Peter Pomerantsev, who is masterly on Russian propaganda, the best in English, I think, where Peter said that culturally, not politically, because American institutions are still quite strong, but culturally, he's seeing resemblance between American political culture today and Russian political culture in the early 90s, when, Zhirinovsky was flourishing. So there we go. Post-truth guy who said all kinds of insane, threatening, violent, ghastly, racist things, and who was largely an actor. He was a hyperactive persona when the cameras were rolling. I've never seen him in real life, but people who have say that he was much more calm, even introverted, and sort of inward and low energy figure off camera. But on camera, he was basically always fist up, screaming, pointing, gesticulating, and threatening what terrible things were going to happen to all kinds of people. So he was a sponge for the ugliest stuff, but he did it as an agent, so as to control some of that stuff. Until certainly now in Russia, we've reached a stage where we're seeing that they're not controlling that stuff anymore. They're incorporating it into their main way of going on politically. Hope that helped a little bit to ground this character. Lots of love. Talk soon.